Welcome to the Pivot Playbook. I'm your host, Kelly Riley. If you're itching for change and seeking inspiration, you're in the right place. We're sharing incredible stories of people who've reinvented their lives and the lessons they've learned along the way. Get ready to be inspired and feel empowered to write your own success story. So buckle up, your pivot starts now. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Pivot Playbook podcast. Today we have Patrice Bobo-Miles with us. Patrice is just an inspiration, a powerhouse, a just all around badass woman. And I am so lucky and blessed to have been able to get to know her. We met through social audio and turns out we're both coaches. We've studied through the same training facility, and we just jive on so many different things. I love being able to chat with her and just learn from her because the wisdom that pours out of this lady is incredible. So I just wanted to welcome you here. Thank you so much, Patrice. Yeah, first question is just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. I love that question because it's always such a loaded question because I feel like there was this part A and then now there's this part. But I actually had a career as a mortgage loan originator, and I did that for 26 years quite successfully. So I provided financing to help people buy homes. It was a very fulfilling career for me. It was an opportunity for me to help people really achieve that one piece of the American dream, and that is to own your own home. And I did that for many, many years. And in the last 3 years or so, my father's health had started to decline. So I was spending a little more time kind of making sure I was at his doctor's appointments, making sure the prescriptions were done and all of those things. And then my mother very suddenly got ill, and she had a heart attack in January. And she was in the hospital from the day we took her until they did her open heart surgery, which was in March. So she was in the hospital January, February, and March. They did this surgery. She came home for a week. We had to take her back to the hospital. We took her to rehab. She'd gotten an infection and she died. Wow. It was very unexpected. And my mother's death hit me really, really hard. My father, I had been kind of working with through all of his issues and taking on the responsibility of being his medical advocate and what that is. And my mom was really stubborn. And so she didn't want us to doctor's appointments, and she didn't want us to know what medication she was taking and all of these things. And I started insisting that I be there. And so what I learned after she passed was that my mom had some really serious issues that she just would not share with us, because you're always your parents' child.
Right.
And said, there's always this, we want to protect our kids kind of thing. And so when my mother passed and my father started to decline, I was spending a lot of time with my dad and less time working in my business. And then my father passed. So 8 months later, my father passed away, same year. And it was at that point in time that I really had to stop and think, when you lose people like that, it really makes you stop and take stock.
Yeah.
And I just kind of sat back for a little bit and I thought, is this still serving me? It had gotten to a point where it wasn't fun anymore. And just a whole lot of things that go with kind of being in that sales area and, the beck and call mentality of so many people. The lack of empathy that I had received from some of the people that I worked with on the sales end, it really made me stop and think. Where I worked, my employers were so supportive through the whole thing. And I sat down and I talked to my husband and I said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Wow. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And it was one of these, I really think I want to look into life coaching. And I considered life coaching because several years ago, I started my own journey to a better Patrice. And I hired a phenomenal life coach who to this day, we still are in touch. And I said, when I was doing mortgages, I was still that person coaching my clients through the process. And I had always been that person in my sphere and in my friend groups that people would come to talk to. They'd look to for perspective, advice, however you want to phrase that. And then I prayed about it. Wow. And I really felt that was where God was calling me to go, where I could be doing something that helped other people, but also fed my soul.
Hmm.
because I'm at a stage in life where that's important to me,
Absolutely.
so I walked away from what that career was. I walked away from a very good income, very good career. I had a really good reputation for doing what I do.
So, can we talk a little bit about the career? I want to
Yeah.
say, like, just to give people a picture of what your career was, I guess the stress levels of it. Like, what was it? What was a day like in your career?
Oh my gosh. At any given point in time, I was trying to close anywhere from 5, 7, 10 files a month. I
Hmm.
mean, as I got older, I actually started to pull back on my production. And so if I was closing $1 million a month, I was happy with that,
Wow.
as opposed to 2.5, 3.5 million, which is what I was doing much younger
Yeah.
in my career. But that's in any given file, it is either a single individual or a husband and a wife, two
Hmm.
people. In
Hmm.
some instances, I'm working with investors and it could be three people. But there was a listing agent, a selling agent, a title company, an appraiser, a surveyor, a home inspector. So all of these people on that side, and then me, my assistant, my processor, my underwriting team. So that's a lot of people to juggle one file. So then I want you to multiply that by 3, 5, 7, 10 files a month.
Wow.
So it was continuous phone calls. There was a point in time that I swear that my cell phone was an extension of my hand. I would get calls at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, texts at 10 o'clock at night. Sundays, people wanted to stop and wanted me to take applications, get them qualified to buy a house. It didn't matter if it was my anniversary, if it was on my kids' birthdays. It didn't matter if my dad had a stroke and was in the hospital. It
Yeah.
just didn't matter. And that was a normal day. I mean, it was a normal day of emails. I really felt like people used to say, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "I solve problems. I'm a
Yeah.
problem solver," because I don't care how much work and preparation you do on the front end to prepare a client to purchase a home. You're going to have clients who just don't want to get you what you need,
Yeah.
just for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, you find clients who lie to you.
Mm.
And through the processing, you find something that just blows your file up out of the water. And then you have agents. Well, I don't understand how you didn't know that. Well, why is this a problem now? And so it was that constant push and pull, always trying to deliver because you're only as good as your last closing.
Yeah.
So it was a constant being on, and still doing that, trying to still bring business in the door, trying to
Mm.
grow new relationships,
Mhm.
being at professional functions, doing open houses and going to realtors offices and doing presentations. And so it was a lot. And, when my kids were younger, I can remember sitting, my daughter was a competitive dancer. My son played travel ball. And I can remember at any given point in time, whether I was at a dance competition or I was at a baseball game, I always had a pad and a paper. I always had access to a calculator in case I had
Mm.
to do hand counts for numbers and talking to people to get them pre-qualified to go look at houses.
Wow.
So there was a part of me that just was not there for my
Yeah.
kids, for my husband, because it was sitting in my business.
You were
And
always
again,
on.
enjoyed it for a very long time because I thrived on that level of stress
Mm.
or action or activity, whatever it is. But as I got older, I was like, and then, like I said, with my parents passing, I'm like, you need to really take a look at your priorities. And
Yeah.
I walked away. I walked away from a very good business.
Yeah.
I walked away from a very good income. But what I found in walking away from that is I really was able to get more in touch with me,
Mm.
myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
There is a piece to me that didn't exist before.
Mhm.
It gave me also an opportunity to grieve the
Mm.
loss that I had at losing both of my parents. And it just kind of gave me a way to find my peace
Mm.
so that I could show up how I wanted to show up as who I am,
Mhm.
as myself. I got to take off all the masks. I got to take off everything. And it's has been so liberating for me to be able to do that.
I love that. I want to touch on because you kind of talked a little bit about how always being on in your business really affected your ability to be present in your family life, right? And so how do I want to pose this question? Where else did you find that? Because I feel like that is such a big thing for people. It's like you get so wrapped up in your business and trying to produce, especially at the level that you're talking about, right? And so to always be on, I think it's a hard thing to shut off even in those situations, right?
Mhm.
So I guess maybe the more the question here is like how was that for your family? How was that for your family experience?
Interestingly enough, I am an extreme extrovert,
Mm,
but when I could get home, I really just needed time to decompress.
right.
I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to be around anyone, whether it was for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half.
Hmm.
I disconnected. I disconnected from my family. I disconnected from my husband. I disconnected from, I had to take some time to just try to decompress, which
Yeah.
wasn't always easy if the phone was ringing or I had to be at a ball game or we had to be at dance so it was just, I really felt like that circus act where they put the plates on the stick and they start spinning the plates and they run
Hmm.
down. And so you have 12 plates spinning and the idea is to get to the 12th place and then run back to the first place just before it falls off the stick and starts
Yeah.
spinning all over again.
Yeah.
That's really how I felt my life was.
That's intense. So you said earlier that a part of the reason that, or a big, huge part of the reason that you decided that enough was enough was the health struggles that your parents had been going through and their passing. Was there anything else going on, I guess, at work or in any other part of your life, even before this happened, where you started to just have that inkling that like, you know what, this is just too much? Or were you just kind of, I almost want to say like blind to it until
Mm-mm. No,
no.
I was not blind to it. Interestingly enough, I have a coworker and um, we would chat. We would find time to chat during the day. It's someone I had worked with him in the very beginning. We like started in the mortgage business at the same company, like almost the same day at the same time kind of thing.
Hmm.
And we're still friends to this day. And we ended up, the last company that I worked for, he ended up there and we ended up in the same office again.
Awesome.
And so we would talk. And, the business got hard. The rates started going up and housing prices started going up. So what we were doing got harder.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had all these regulations that came through with Dodd-Frank and RESPA and all of these things. And then it got hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the question was, is the money that we were earning, because again, we were earning a very good income, was it worth the hard?
Mm-hmm.
And I started to feel myself burn out long before I walked away. It was several
Yeah.
years knowing I was kind of sitting in burnout, but not leaving the business. I had even
Mm-hmm.
gotten to a point where I live in Florida and during the summer, it's like everybody knew, don't bother Patrice on Friday because she's at the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't go into the office. I may or may not take a phone call, but this is when I was starting to learn how to put boundaries in place
Right.
because I recognized that if I didn't do something to protect myself,
Yeah.
as in nurture my spirit, take care of me, make sure that my needs are being met, that I was going to probably end up 6 feet under, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I had been to the hospital a couple times, anxiety and panic attacks. It's not like I was a young originator anymore. I was one of the more seasoned originators in our market. And, age with women comes with its own set of stigmas as well.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I knew that I knew I was in burnout. I knew that I allowed myself to stay in burnout for a while too. But in that situation, I really started to learn some really important lessons about self-care, setting boundaries, and really being able to just stand firm on my no.
So with that, right, getting yourself to a point of recognizing that you're suffering from some kind of burnout, you're taking these Fridays for yourself. What is it that kept you in it as long as you were, right? If you knew for a couple of years that something is off here and I have to have these firm boundaries about it, what kept you there?
Interestingly enough, the devil you know sometimes is better than the devil you don't.
Oh, Lord, I haven't
Um,
heard that one in a long time, but
and I knew that business.
Mm.
And I had excelled at that business. And even sitting in burnout, I was doing okay. And I had gotten into my mind, if I am not doing this, then what am I going
Right.
to do?
Right.
Right. So there was this whole unknown out there. And, when you decide to pivot,
Mm.
the uncertainty, the apprehension, the
Mm-hmm.
fear, the hesitancy, the little bully in your head telling you that you can't do it. All of those things come into play. And you really have to be able to, number one, recognize what's going on, right?
Right.
But number two, know how to work through what those things were. Still had my life coach. And, I have a therapist. I am a firm believer that everybody should have a therapist and a life coach
Yeah.
because they serve two different roles for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and to this day, I have a therapist, and to this day, I have a life coach. And, for lack of a better term, in the modalities that they work in, they both help me pull my head out of my ass,
Mm.
quite honestly, and just bravely step into what that unknown was going to be, that
Right.
uncharted.
Right. So there was a little bit of fear is what you're saying, right? You
Oh,
had
no,
all
there was a
these
lot of
things.
fear. Now, there wasn't a little bit. There was a freak ton of fear hanging out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. You just get really comfortable in what you're doing because it's what you know and you're so dang successful in it. Thinking about pivoting and doing something else is just scary, especially when there's a whole world worth of other things that you could be doing. But how do you narrow it down to that thing that you
Mhm,
want to do that fits
mhm,
better, right?
mhm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And,
Yeah.
a lot, I will say that I do a lot of things well as far I have various talents.
Hmm.
And so, I had to kind of step back and think, okay, I can't do it all at one time.
Hmm.
So what is the first thing that I want to do?
Hmm.
Because not doing it all at one time does not mean that at some point in time I can't go revisit something.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I went through the training to get certified as a life coach. I called a few of my friends who are coaches, life coach. I have a friend who's a business coach, so I reached out to a couple of those people and I said, hey, I want to tell you what I'm thinking about doing. And then I said, and remember, this is me. So, I'm already like, oh, there's just no way this is going to happen. So I
Hmm.
let them both, I listened to what they had to say. They talked me off of the ledge.
Hmm.
And there was a part of me, honestly, that had to move forward on their faith in me
Mm.
because sometimes people see the power in you that you either don't see or you're not willing to accept as real.
Yeah. I that is a very good one because I think it's very, very true. And I feel like that's something I've heard a couple of times from some of the different people I've talked to along the way. It's like they didn't necessarily have the faith in themselves in the moment that they were going to be able to make this change happen in their lives, but it was their friends and family and the people around them that were the ones who really gave them the strength and the motivation to lean on, and that was why they were able to get through. So I love that.
Mhm,
I love that.
mhm,
So speaking of, I know that in talking to you previously, not only was it your business coach friend, your life coach friend, you said that your husband as well was somebody that you were able to, I'll say, lean on, and he helped you make this decision. So tell me about that conversation. I guess, and maybe frame it a little bit, because I think you had also mentioned this conversation happened around the time that these losses were happening in your life as well, right?
mhm. Yeah, it most definitely did. And you will always have people tell you, do not make life-changing decisions while you're
Mm,
grieving.
yeah.
Okay, I don't. There are just times I just don't listen to. There is that. Um, and like I said, my husband and I have been married for 36 years at this point in time. He knew that I was not happy. It was
Mm,
very obvious. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, obviously,
mhm,
going through what that grief is. I was angry, beyond angry, not striking out at people, but realizing I needed to work through some things as well. And, he has always supported me, harebrained, crazy, whatever. He's always supported me. And so I said, the conversation's kind of like, I'm not happy. And
Mm.
he's like, I know, I can tell. And I said, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And he said, okay. And I said, and I've got to get out of this business. He goes, you
Mm.
do. I know you've got to get out of this business. And I said, I'm going to need time though to build this coaching business. It's not like I'm going to say, hey, I'm a coach and I'm going to have all these clients. And
Right.
I said, so we have always been a two income household. And I earned quite a bit more money than my husband because I was on commissions. I
Mm.
mean,
Mhm.
it's what I decided to go into. So my income would fluctuate. And he was that steady W-2 income, man. I mean, he was the rock. And it was kind of like, you're going to be carrying it for a
Mm.
while,
Yeah.
and we've never been in a situation where that was the case. So that added a layer of, to the whole thing as
Mm.
well. And he said, if that's what you feel like you need to do, then that's what you need to do. And, I'm at this point and I have clients, but, I'm certainly not making the income that I would like to be making.
You're right.
And he is still just, he's pulling me off the ceiling. He's reminding me to be patient because we both know that's not something I do well. Um, and he's just there. He's like the rock. He's the rock. I don't even know how else I can. He has loved me through some shit, and he continues to love me through all of it and support me. And I'm really, really fortunate that I have that in my partner.
That's very special. Very special. I think the other thing I want to ask about is you also had this conversation with your mom, right? Before she had passed away. So tell us about that conversation.
Oh, when I had to have the end of life conversation with her.
The end of life and where she also knew that a pivot might have been imminent or needed.
My mom didn't pull any punches. I think it's part of the reason that I am that the way that I am. And like I said, your parents always are going to worry about you. I don't care if you're 30, 40, 50, if you're 60 years old and you still have parents here, you are always your parents' child.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Um, and my mom and I were really, really good friends on top of everything else. There was an instance I was home. I was working from home. This was after COVID, but I was working more from home than going in the office at this point because I had a home office set up. And my son is a physical therapist. He's got his doctorates in physical therapy. And he had called me that afternoon and I said, I'm having some chest pains. And I said, and my arm is tingling. He's like, Mom, if you don't go to the hospital, I'm like, Aaron, your dad's going to be home in a little bit for lunch. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, Mom. And so, of course, he's up in my grill. His wife is a doctor. The next thing I know, she's calling me and she's like, if you don't I said, I need y'all both to slow your roll. Mike's going to be home in a few minutes. And so Mike comes in and I'm like, dude. And so I'm telling him what's going on. And I said, and I go, do you really think I need to go to the emergency room? And he's like, seriously?
Mm.
So, off to the emergency room we go, overnight stay, all this stuff's going on. I get home and my mom has called me in the hospital, but she's being cool. She's being nice. I get home. We find out that it was a panic attack. It wasn't my heart. It wasn't any of
Mm.
those things. And she just looked me in the eyes and she said, you got to find something else to do. I mean, no,
Mm.
you got to find something else to do. She goes, this stress is too much. I've been telling you this for years. And she had been. And I just kind of looked at her and I went, okay, Mom. And because I didn't want to get into it with her.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
for years, my mother was on me to change my career because she saw how it was slowly just beating me up mentally,
Mm.
physically, emotionally, all of those things. Oh yeah, she was all over me.
So, from
All over
what
me.
you're saying, it sounds like literally everybody around you knew that it's time for Patrice to stop doing the shit, right? But the fear kept you in it
It did.
regardless. The fear and the comfortability and maybe the money too, right? Because like
Oh yeah.
you mentioned earlier, if you had always been, I'll say, quote unquote, the breadwinner, right? And now there's the fear of losing that money and having to rely on one income. Like that's a lot to keep you there.
Hmm.
So again, it doesn't matter how many people are telling you you got to get out. It's comfortable, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
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 Interesting.
Yeah. Hmm. And I'm a little stubborn and hard headed too.
Hmm. And as you're telling the story and talking about your mom and how direct she is, I'm like, I wonder where Patrice got it from.
Kelly,
This
I don't
makes,
know what you
hmm,
mean. I don't
this
know what you mean.
makes a little bit of sense.
Apple and tree. It's that apple tree thing.
Right. Okay. So, um, your dad passes, your mom passes, and this was the catalyst for you to finally just like, I'm done with everything. Right. So, tell us about, I guess, that part of the journey. And what was your first step? Like, what was the first thing that you did?
I cried a lot and I really had to get introspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to pray about it because it was, I was talking about walking away from something that I had been doing successfully for over 25 years of my life. I still have a strong sense of if somebody wants to buy a home, there should be a way for them to buy a home.
Right.
I mean, I helped people get into homes who never ever thought they'd be able to own their own home. And to this day, that is still something that is a burning passion for me. I feel like if you are wanting to own a home,
Mm-hmm.
there should be somebody out there to help you navigate what that is and help you reach that goal. And I still feel strongly about that. And you can hear
Right.
that and how I talk about it.
Absolutely.
But there came a point in my life where that passion for what that is started to become overwritten by the fact that I wasn't healthy. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't happy. I didn't feel emotionally healthy. To be taking anxiety medication because of the stress of a job, to not feel like I could take a day because everything would blow up if I didn't. At some point in time, my mental health, my well-being had to take precedence. Just like wanting to eat the ice cream and knowing you still want to drop, 5 pounds to get in that cute little dress for the holidays. So are
Mm-hmm.
you going to eat the ice cream or are you going to focus on the dress?
At some point, you gotta focus on the goal, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. So now that you've pivoted, you've left this job, you're stepping into something else, like how has it felt for you stepping into a new career path? Especially one that's so different. I want to say so different because I mean, yes, you were probably coaching and mentoring people all through your last career, but at the same time, this is very different, right? So
Mhm.
how has it felt to step into being this version of Patrice with this new career?
That's a really good question, Kelly. I don't think I've really thought about it before. I just took one step at a time.
Mm,
Um, I found my voice. I found my real direction as far as where and how I wanted to coach.
hmm
I found a new confidence in the fact that I can look at someone and say, I am a really good coach and know that I am a really good coach, and so it's just been the time and part of the journey. It's like I said, when I started, it was so far removed from my comfort zone that I was terrified.
right.
But I knew that change had to happen for me and that I was the only one who could make that change happen and be a lasting change.
hmm
Since I've moved into life coaching, I've got my business. I'm doing something totally outside of my comfort zone. Um, I have, I'm putting together a women's summit in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. It's called Candid Conversations with Women. And, we're talking about women's issues. We're talking about menopause, perimenopause, full blown menopause, postmenopause. We're talking about the emotional and mental aspects of the empty nest syndrome. And we're talking about the emotional and mental aspects of what happens when you become the caregiver, whether
mm
it's a parent or a spouse, and what does that journey look like? And of course, we're going to hit a little bit of my sweet spot. And my coach is actually going to be there. And together, we're going to talk about female empowerment and walking in your power and really what are the things you need to do to dig deep to find who you are and who you want to be at your true and most authentic level. So terrified. It's like I'm throwing this big party and I don't know if anybody's going to come. But I got great speakers lined up. It's a great event. And so I'm just praying that there's success there. Just finished putting together my first book. It's a journal, but it's an affirmations journal. Never thought I'd see myself doing any of these things. And so again, terrified. When I say scared shitless, I'm not kidding. But I also know that I've laid the groundwork, I've got the people there, and I just plan on it being good. We're just going to make it good,
So you touched on something in what you said. It's like now, okay, you are putting together this conference, you've written a book, you're doing things that you never would have thought that you would have been able to do. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, about that part of life now, right? Like your life has opened up, you've got more time and more energy, or you tell me what is happening in your life now that you would never have been able to do before, and it's because you took the chance and you made a pivot.
The interesting thing for me is I believe that when you are in the place that you're ready to pivot, like I said, that voice in our head is a real bully. She's a she's a little bitch. She can be a little bitch.
Just call it like it is.
Call it like it is.
Yeah.
But with that comes, for me, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, I really had to get through the imposter syndrome aspect of it. And that's why I said, for a while, I leaned on everybody else's faith in me to do this. And I think at one point in time, and I said, why not me? Why can't I do this? There's no reason why I can't do this.
Yes.
So why am I letting myself believe that I'm not capable of making this happen? And so again, when I just kind of sat down with it and went deep and spent time with it and prayed about it, the answers were there. And as I'm moving forward, I'm going to make so many mistakes, but the good thing is I know that they're going to happen. Right. And I'm looking for what the lessons are and what those mistakes,
right?
Because it's in those mistakes, failures, falling, whatever you want to call it, that's where I'm going to get better and stronger and more focused and more determined to be better and do better and show up as the best version of myself every time.
I love that. How do you feel? I'm going to say, if you had to put a couple of words to it, it was high pressure, your job before, stressful, there was anxiety. How does Patrice feel now?
Patrice is happy. I am happy. I know who I am. I'm very true to who that is, who that person is. And I show up in a way that is more confident, more self-assured, more at peace. I had an incident recently where someone was just, for lack of a better term, they went at me. And I think before this point in time, to say that I would have packed him up and handled it, I would have. And, this go around, I just kind of sat back and let whatever was going to happen. And then when I had the opportunity to speak, I took total control of what the situation was. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't, and I like that version of me better.
Right.
I really like that version of me better.
Right. Do you think you would have gotten to that version of self without making the change, without leaving your old career? No.
No, I do not.
I think one of the things that I love asking people about when I do this is like, what does life look like now for people? Because I think that's anybody who's listening in who's on the fence of making a pivot, that's the part they can't see. They can't see what's on the other side. They can't necessarily visualize or feel or think about what it's going to feel like to be the new version of self. But when you can hear from other people that they went from this feeling of like, fuck everything to peace, and your days are easy. I mean, who the hell doesn't want to invite something like that into their lives, right? Like,
Right.
God, listen, I got my Palo Santo here. I'm burning sage and shit every day, listening to my meditation music. I was not doing that before, but life is good. Life is good. It's quiet. It's simple, it's relaxing, and like for me, that came because I made a pivot. So I love hearing what that looks like and sounds like for other people. So, let me see. What other questions do I have here? Do you have any, like, what's a message I want to say that you would like to share with somebody else who, maybe in the same business as you are, or even if they're not, they're just on the fence about making a pivot and they're a little bit scared? What would you tell them?
I'd probably say a couple of things. Number one, fear or change, growth does not happen inside of your comfort zone. It
Mm-hmm.
just does not. And I know it almost sounds cliche to say it, but it's a cliche because it is so very true.
Right.
If you are sitting in a place in your life where you're recognizing that you need to make a change, pull up your big girl panties and make the change.
Big girl
Um,
panties. And what's the other thing?
which part is that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the grass is greenest where you choose to water it.
Right.
So it's not that the grass is greener on the other side because it's all grass,
Mm.
but where you choose to put your energy and your effort is where you're going to see the fruits of what that is. And if you are not willing to bet on yourself, why would anybody else be willing
Mm-hmm.
to bet
Mm-hmm.
on you? Because eventually, I don't care what job you work, I don't care where you're at, I don't care what you're doing. At some point in time, it's going to come down to, well, does this person really trust herself enough that I can trust them with this?
Right.
Because eventually you show people who you are. If you're a fearful person, it's going to come out one way or the other.
Right.
If you are walking around as a characterization of yourself, that will begin to show itself as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so investing in yourself, doing something that you're passionate about, doing something that you care about, making that pivot, it is stressful. I'm not going to lie. It is stressful. And there are times you're like, I don't know if this was a smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when you work through what all that is and you get to a place of clarity, and this is the direction that I know I'm supposed to be going, you find there's a newfound confidence and faith in yourself when you get to that place of clarity.
Absolutely. I love that. Something that's been playing in my mind since you said it is, when you're talking about the grass is greener where you water it, it's at what point are you going to choose to water your own grass?
That part.
Right? Right. Right. I love that. That one's going to be mental noted somewhere because, yeah. All right. So, last question, because I love this. This has been a great interview. Where can we talked about your conference, we talked about your book, but if somebody wants to get to know more about you, they want to be able to work with you, how does somebody find you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Patrice Bobo-Miles. It's spelled out here on the screen. The website for my business is milesaheadlifecoaching.com. You'll have an opportunity to see some of the testimonials for some of the clients that I've worked with, the types of services and coaching that I provide as well. So yeah, those are probably the best ways. You can slide into my DMs on Insta if that's what you want to do. But yeah, that's how you find me.
Awesome. Love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you so
Oh,
much.
and I'm on a
Oh,
few social audio platforms
okay,
as
do it.
well.
Yeah.
So,
Which ones? Tell me. Tell us.
I just started a house on, I don't know if anyone is familiar with the audio app, but it's called Clubhouse. The house itself is called Empower Heard. I also have a presence on the social audio. It's a very small group. I don't know if it's out for public yet. It's still kind of beta testing, but it's called Chatter.
Hmm.
I have a club of the same name on Chatter as well. And I host a podcast with two of my friends. It's called Funny, Sexy, Wise. We have one of us who I think is almost 40. We have one of us who is barely 50. And then we have me. So when we were talking about it, I said, well, what I do know is that I'm not funny and, I'm not sure about sexy. So I guess because I'm the oldest of the group, then I just get to be the wise one.
Patrice, if either one of them was here right now, the side eyes they'd be giving you at this moment, like, they're still arguing, well, not arguing, trying to figure out who fits into what title. But I think you guys are all three.
We just swap
Exactly.
places.
Exactly. Depends on the episode, you know?
Yeah. I say, look, guys, I am almost 60. So I definitely get to be the wise one. I have the most lived experience here.
I love it so much. Well, thank you, Patrice. This has been amazing. I think there's been a ton of gems in here, and I really can't wait to have people hear your story and hear the feedback from it, because I think they're going to get a lot from your journey and everything that you've had to say today.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on.